What is going on, you beautiful humans? This is actually not going to be a typical Apple product review, so I just need to let you know that. But if you care about how much your next iPhone might cost, you're going to want to stick around for this one, because today we are diving into a developing story involving Apple, those US tariffs, that global manufacturing, and the real price of staying in the Apple ecosystem. And let me be clear from the top here. I've actually been slowly building out a finance channel here on YouTube, and I usually keep this type of content over there, which is why you haven't really seen me here lately, but I am still here on this channel, and I really wanted to chat with you because this is the audience right here that is passionate about that tech that I have been reviewing for years, because I feel like many of you are well versed in Apple's history, especially when I see comments out there about if Steve Jobs were to still be alive, that Apple wouldn't have moved manufacturing to China. But most of us actually know that this has been the case for like 25 years or so. And this video isn't supposed to be political. It's about economics, manufacturing, and your personal tech choices. And if Apple is forced to make the iPhone in America, what would that actually mean for you as a consumer? And let's create a healthy debate, because I do love to hear from you. And yes, I'll still offer advice on which MacBook to invest in if that's really what you want to keep this conversation about. Now, if you've been following the news, if many of you have, Trump met with Apple CEO Tim Cook at the White House, and following that meeting, Trump announced a proposed 25% tariff on all iPhones imported into the US unless Apple shifts its production to the United States. And this came right after the news broke that Apple, through its partner Foxconn, they were planning a $1.5 billion manufacturing expansion in India. Now, Trump publicly criticized this move and saying Apple is free to build in India, but those products would face a hefty tariff at the US border. So the question really does become, does this make good business sense, or is it just a political gamble that the consumer is just kind of mixed up in? And as these tariffs have continued to be like moving of the goalposts, so to speak, as I was actually prepping for this video, the US Court of International Trade ruled that Trump exceeded his authority by imposing certain tariffs without congressional approval. And this decision temporarily halts the implementation of some of these tariffs, including those affecting Apple. But nonetheless, the administration plans to appeal, and the outcome remains uncertain. And Apple has spent decades perfecting its supply chain, most notably in China. While China isn't the cheapest option anymore, it does offer something arguably more valuable, which is scale, speed, and a highly integrated manufacturing ecosystem. And Apple has been gradually diversifying its manufacturing footprint, and in 2020, reports had indicated plans to produce iPhone 12 models in India by mid-2021. And this strategy aimed to reduce reliance on Chinese manufacturing and tap into that, growing market that's in India. However, the looming pressure of tariffs could complicate this approach, potentially affecting Apple's supply chain and those pricing strategies. And if Apple were to relocate iPhone manufacturing to the US, it wouldn't be as simple as flipping a switch, because we're talking about building a new supplier network. You got to train massive workforces here and overcoming regulatory hurdles. And this isn't as simple as just as we hear, bots and increased automation doing all of the work. Experts have suggested that it would take about 5 to 8 years and billions in new infrastructure to even get close to the efficiency of China. So here's the question that I have for you. Would you be willing to wait longer or pay more if your iPhone was made in the US? And analysts do estimate that producing iPhones in the US would raise production costs by up to as much as 75%. And Morgan Stanley even noted that even with a 25% imported tariff, it would still be cheaper to build abroad. So let's actually break that down. So the cost to make an iPhone today is around $400 to $700. And of course, that really just kind of depends on the model. And as far as a retail price, well, we know that it starts at $799 for those flagship devices, which many consumers upgrade from there anyway. So really, if made in the US, some estimates put the retail price at over $3,500. Now, of course, I know that number might sound shocking, but it could actually be a realistic consequence of reshoring without the right infrastructure. So ask yourself, at what point does the loyalty to the Apple ecosystem start to hurt? And despite that threat of the tariffs, Apple did announce plans to invest $500 billion in US operations over the next 4 years, including a new facility in Houston, Texas, focused on producing servers for Apple Intelligence. And we just won't go there on this one. But as much of this is really unclear, when we talk about what is really going to be earmarked for iPhone production, because I think that there's actually a lot of spend that's going to be happening here. And basically, Apple is just announcing investment in the US market just to kind of appease like whoever they need to appease, of course, this current administration. But much of this was already on the table and in the works even before this pressure from the current administration had occurred. And Apple has played that long game before, but this could actually be a strategic hedge. But if this investment doesn't translate to actual smartphone production, then these tariffs might hit Apple where it actually hurts. And that is the bottom line. Of course, its stock price. And of course, the shareholders are going to be pretty upset about that. And maybe some of you are actually hoping that this forces Apple's position, which I'd actually love to know your thoughts below. But since Trump's announcement and kind of the back and forth, Apple stock has dropped like 3%, and it was in pre-market trading. And then of course, throughout the day as of this video. And of course, the broader market did dip as well. And meanwhile, like, gold prices continue to rise, which is a classic sign of economic anxiety, which I think we've all been experiencing over these last several months. But let's actually talk about you. Would a $3,500 iPhone push you to consider another device? And I know that that price sounds ridiculous, and it's probably just more salacious than anything, but it's just kind of a number that's being thrown around. But I know that, of course, there's the OnePlus or even a Samsung device that, sure, but it's an entirely different ecosystem. But is this what's needed to break this hold that Apple actually has? Or are you just so deep into iMessage, AirDrop, and iCloud that switching feels like nearly impossible? Seriously, drop a comment on this one, because would the price hikes change your habits, or are you kind of just riding with Apple no matter what? And this also just kind of gets me to that point of consumer debt and people putting things like on credit cards or overextending themselves. Again, this is kind of like my finance channel coming into play, but it is certainly worrisome. But Apple isn't alone. Samsung, which also produces many of its devices overseas, would be affected by similar tariffs. But, Samsung already has some production capacity in the US and, of course, Vietnam, giving it just a slight advantage. But there is no one that is going to be escaping unscathed, especially you. These tariffs could reshape the entire smartphone landscape. And as much as we're trying to push for innovation, especially like the things that I talk about on this channel, because these devices have pretty much been an iterative upgrade, and it now seems that we're like on here right now, myself included, just making sure that we're not paying 3 times the price for the same product. But let's not forget, and of course, this actually does keep changing, but the US Court of International Trades, their recent ruling that Trump exceeded his authority on certain tariffs, including that 20% levy on Chinese imports that directly affected Apple, that ruling has temporarily been suspended in some of those penalties. But here's the thing, it's not all of it. And this raises an important question, because one administration unilaterally reshaping an entire industry, and really, where are the checks in this? Because regardless of who you voted for, we actually have to look at this through the lens of long-term economic strategy and technological independence. And can an administration, any administration, restructure a global supply chain that took decades to build with a single policy shift? And more importantly, what does this mean for innovation, for the competition, for the consumer? And, on one hand, reshoring production could strengthen national security. It could create jobs. It could reduce reliance on geopolitical rivals. But on the other hand, it risks supply chain disruptions, massive cost increases, and of course, potentially slower product development cycles. So here's the real tension. Are we willing to trade affordability and convenience for economic nationalism? And is the tech that we love, your iPhone, your MacBook, and your AirPods, and all of the other Apple products out there, is it still worth it if the price doubles or triples? And here's the thing, maybe it would slow down people upgrading their devices. I mean, that's a possibility too. But I turn it over to you. Is this about protecting American jobs? Is it political theater? Or is it a reality check on just how fragile our tech items really are? And honestly, if you got some value from this video, please hit that like button, and by all means, get down there in the comment section below. I will join you in that conversation. And please remember to be excellent to each other in those comments. And of course, until next time, you keep rocking those faces, and I will catch you right back here on the next one. And yes, I will advise you on which MacBook to purchase.